I stood at the edge of the gravel road that used to lead straight to my grandmother's land. Only now, a fresh metal gate blocked the way, shiny silver and smug. Tied to it was a brand new sign in big red letters. Private property, no trespassing. It was nailed into the same oak tree that Grandma once hung wind chimes on every spring. I could still hear their faint jingle in my memory, even as silence pressed down like August heat. Behind the gate, I saw her Marla, my cousin. She was wearing those oversized sunglasses she thought made her look rich, standing next to a man in khaki pants, who I assumed was her latest contractor. They didn't see me yet. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. This land used to be open, not just physically, but spiritually. Grandma always said land only matters when it's shared. But the woman standing behind that gate hadn't shared a thing in years except disdain. I stepped forward. My foot crunched on the gravel. Marla looked up, squinted behind her glasses, and walked toward the gate slowly, like she had all the time in the world. "Well," she said, "didn't expect to see you." I nodded toward the sign. I came to say goodbye. This land was half my childhood. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Well, it's all mine now." Grandma made that very clear in her will. I didn't respond. I'd already lost that fight, if you could call it a fight. More like a silent ambush. The will had been changed 2 months before Grandma passed in a quiet trip to Marla's lawyer. No one told me, not until it was too late. Marla kept talking, her tone sugar-sweet and full of venom. "But hey, maybe you can visit if you bring cookies or something." She laughed like it was a joke. I looked past her at the field beyond. The barn was still there, worn but proud. The pond Grandma taught me to fish in. The tree swing. All of it pieces of a world I thought I'd grow old beside. But that world didn't want me anymore. Or maybe she didn't. So I turned around. "Nothing to say," Marla called after me. No tears, no lawsuit threats. I paused, then looked over my shoulder and said calmly, "You won the land, Marla. But you might want to double-check how people get to it." That wiped the smile off her face. I got in my truck, backed down the road, slowly, the same one my grandma used to drive every Sunday after church. My hands were steady on the wheel. Marla thought she'd buried me with a legal document, but she forgot something my grandma once told me. The land is only as powerful as the road that leads to it. And I had a hunch. That road wasn't hers. I was 9 the first time Grandma let me drive the old tractor across the field. My legs barely reached the pedals, and the engine roared louder than I expected. But she just stood there, hands on her hips, grinning like I'd won a gold medal. "You gotta feel the dirt," she said. "Know it under your bones. That's how land speaks to you." I grew up on that land. Not visiting on weekends, not stopping by for holidays. I lived it. Woke up to the smell of dew and hay. Fell asleep to the soft chirp of crickets in the summer and the creak of the windmill in winter. Grandma raised me after my mom left, and Dad tried, but never really knew how. Marla, on the other hand, grew up in Atlanta. Fancy schools, tennis lessons, spring breaks in Cabo. Her mom was Grandma's oldest daughter, and she always acted like that gave her more claim to everything. But she never cared about the land. She hated the dirt, the heat, the bugs, the quiet. She once called it that forgotten patch of nowhere. But to me, it was everything. When I turned 18, I stayed. I took online classes while helping Grandma with the animals and harvest. I built fences, fixed plumbing, canned peaches. I learned to read weather better than any app. When Grandma's knees gave out, I carried the feed sacks. When her vision blurred, I read her Bible aloud every night. She wasn't just my guardian. She was my best friend, my teacher, my anchor. We never talked much about inheritance. It didn't feel right. I assumed the land would come to me because, well, who else? I was the one who kept it alive. I never expected riches, just roots. But roots don't show up in paperwork. The last year of Grandma's life, Marla started visiting more often, sending gift baskets, hiring yard crews, bringing friends for weekend wine tastings in the pasture. "She's being sweet," Grandma said, once stirring her tea. "Maybe she's growing up." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But something felt off. Her smiles were too wide. Her questions too specific. Who holds the deed to the well access? Is the mineral rights clause still active? Do you have a backup copy of the will? I asked Grandma about it, gently, and she waved me off. She's just looking out for me, she said. Same as you. But we weren't the same, not even close. Then, one day, Marla took Grandma on a weekend trip. Just the two of them. A spa retreat, she said. I stayed behind to tend the animals and catch up on chores. When they came back, everything looked normal until I noticed Grandma had a new folder in her desk. Legal documents, fresh signatures. The will had been updated. She didn't tell me, not that day, not that week. A month later, she was gone. Quiet heart failure in the middle of the night. I found her curled in her favorite chair by the window, her knitting resting in her lap, tea still warm beside her. The funeral was small. Marla handled the estate stuff, as she called it, and scheduled the reading with her own attorney. I didn't think much of it until I sat in that office and heard words I'll never forget. To my granddaughter, Marla, I leave the entirety of my property at 823 Willow Bend and all assets therein. To my granddaughter, Rachel, I leave my love and admiration. That was it. My name spoken like an afterthought. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. I felt like a ghost in the room, watching someone else's life be handed away. Later, I asked Mr. Jenkins' grandma's longtime attorney if he'd ever seen the updated will. He hadn't. I drafted a will 5 years ago, he said. But that's not the one Marla submitted. I could have fought it. Maybe. But I knew I'd lose more than I'd win. Legal fees, time pain, and worst of all, the shadow it would cast on Grandma's memory. So I let it go. At least, I let that part go. But I kept thinking about one detail: Grandma never updated the maps, never redrew the boundary lines, never paid for access to the private road. The only way to reach that land legally was a narrow stretch of gravel road that ran through a forgotten sliver of property. A road Grandma had always called shared by handshake. So I started digging through deeds, survey maps, county records, dusty drawers at City Hall. And what I found made my heart pound. The road wasn't part of the inheritance. It was listed under a dormant LLC, long expired. And with the right paperwork, it could be mine. The more I read through the old deeds, the more something didn't sit right. Grandma had always said, a place isn't worth much if no one can get to it. And here was this parcel just under 2 acres that no one had touched in years. A narrow stretch of unpaved road that cut through private woodland and connected the main highway to the south edge of Grandma's land. It was the only access route for vehicles. The other 3 sides of the property were surrounded by dense forest marshland and a retired railroad bed. No road, no access. That forgotten strip of gravel, it was everything. According to the county records, the road was still listed under a limited liability company called Red Maple Holdings, a shell company created by a local farmer back in the 80s, long before anyone cared about who owned an access path in the middle of nowhere. But Red Maple Holdings had been dissolved. No taxes filed, no renewals, which meant, according to the law, it was reclaimable. It took a week of phone calls, paperwork, and more than a few early morning visits to the assessor's office, but I got it. I refiled under my own name, paid the necessary fees, registered the land, transferred the rights. It was mine. I owned the road. And just like that, everything changed. The first thing I did was install a sign at the base of the gravel entrance, private easement, access by permit only. Owner enforced nothing aggressive. Nothing confrontational, just a reminder that some doors weren't open anymore. A few days later, Marla called. I saw your little sign, she said, her voice tight like stretched plastic. Very funny. Wasn't a joke, I replied. You can't just block the road. That's illegal. No, I said calmly, it's not. You don't own it. Never did. There was a long pause. Rachel, she said slowly, I'm starting construction next week. I have builder's permits, trucks, I know, I said. And they'll need a legal access route. So unless you've built a bridge over the marsh or cleared the forest in the last 48 hours, I think we both know where they'll be headed. She started to say something, then hung up. That night, I sat by my window and stared out into the dusk. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt still. For once, I held the key. Not because I forced my way in, but because I knew how things really worked. And because I was willing to do the quiet work no one else ever bothered with. 3 days later, Marla's contractors arrived pickup trucks loaded with materials, blueprints rolled under their arms. I met them at the entrance to the gravel path. "Can we go through?" one asked, polite, confused. "We're supposed to start laying foundation this week." "I'm afraid this is private access," I said, holding the paperwork. "You'll need a permit from the owner." "And who's the owner?" I smiled. "That would be me." The foreman scratched his head. "So, what do we do?" I handed him my number. "Tell Marla she can call me. I'm open to discussing a temporary access agreement." They turned around. That afternoon, she showed up at my door. She didn't knock, just waited in her car with the engine running, sunglasses on again, like a shield. I stepped outside and walked over. "Nice to see you," I said. "This is childish," she snapped. "This is legal," I replied. She leaned out the window. "You always were the type to dig through the fine print. Grandma called you the quiet one. I should have known you'd do something sneaky." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because of how wrong she was. "This isn't sneaky," I said. "It's strategic. You took what you thought mattered. I protected what actually does." She didn't say anything, just stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "I'm willing to grant you temporary access," I continued, "if you agree to preserve certain parts of the property. The swing tree, the garden patch, the old barn." She blinked. "What are you talking about? I want them left intact. That's all I ask. You can build your big glass house or whatever you're doing out there, but don't erase what made that place home. And if I say no, then your trucks won't pass this gate." She didn't respond. She just drove off. But a week later, her crew returned with new plans in hand and tape marking off the swing tree and barn perimeter. No apology, no thank you. But compliance. That was enough. I wasn't interested in punishing her. I wasn't trying to win. I just wanted something to remain for Grandma. For me. For the truth. Because land without access is just a patch of grass. But a road, especially one claimed by purpose, means power. The papers came in the mail on a Thursday. Thick envelope. Heavy return address. When I opened it, I saw what I expected. Marla was filing a motion for a court-ordered easement. She wanted permanent access to the road, my road-siding development necessity. I stared at the document for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed something I'd been slowly realizing. This wasn't about family anymore. Not to her. It was a land development project, pure and simple. Just another investment she could stamp her name on and flip in 5 years for profit. To her, Grandma's land was a future profit margin. To me, it was sacred ground. I could have fought it in court. I could have forced a drawn-out legal battle. I had the documentation, the timeline. Even the county officials signed affidavit verifying that the road belonged to me. But I didn't. Instead, I made a call. I reached out to a local land conservation group, people who specialized in protecting farmland, preserving heritage trees, keeping stories alive through the land itself. It wasn't just about stopping bulldozers. It was about keeping memory rooted in soil. I offered them a deal. I'd donate half of the gravel road and an easement buffer zone as protected access on one condition: that I would retain veto rights over any commercial development connected to that stretch of road. They agreed. We signed it over the following week. A small signing ceremony, no media. Just a few conservationists, a lawyer and me, holding the pen like it weighed 100 pounds. By the following Monday, Marla's construction company was served with new restrictions. They could no longer widen the road. They could no longer pave it. They could not add signage, alter drainage, or build past a 10-foot buffer from the old fence line. Marla called me furious. "What the hell did you do? I protected something I said. You're sabotaging this entire project." "No," I replied softly. "I'm preserving the last piece of Grandma that still feels like home." "You're impossible." "No," I said with a half smile. "I'm patient." Click. That night, I sat on my porch with a blanket over my knees, sipping tea from the same mug Grandma used when the weather turned. I thought about all the times she read to me under the willow tree, the way her hands smelled like tomato vines and dish soap, the way she hummed hymns when she thought no one was listening. And I realized something. I didn't need the land deed. I didn't need the barn or the swing or the garden. Because what she left me wasn't property. It was principle. She taught me to stand my ground, but with grace. To fight, but with integrity. To defend what matters not out of spite, but out of love. In the weeks that followed, Marla scaled back her construction. She didn't sell the land, but she couldn't build the luxury home she'd bragged about. She put up a small house instead, modest, boxy, forgettable. Sometimes I drive by the gravel path just to check that the trees are still standing, that the field still breathes, and every time I see the new sign at the entrance, Margaret's Way, private access, I smile. Not because I won, but because I remembered who I was. The granddaughter who stayed, the woman who listened, the one who chose legacy over leverage. Marla never spoke to me again, but a neighbor told me she asked if she could plant hydrangeas along the old fence. Maybe that's something, maybe not. But I didn't need closure. I just needed to know that somewhere, somehow, my grandmother's voice still whispered through the wind along the road we used to walk together. And now that road will always be there. It's funny how something as plain as a dirt road can carry so much weight. These days, I walk it sometimes. Not because I need to, but because I want to remember. I want to feel the gravel crunch beneath my boots, to see the sunlight scatter between the branches like it did when I was 10. I want to pass the spot where Grandma taught me to whistle through a blade of grass, where we sat on overturned buckets, shelling peas for hours, and never once ran out of things to say. There's no gate anymore, no angry signs, no threats. Just a narrow path with a modest wooden post that reads Margaret's Way, private access. People ask me sometimes why I went through all the trouble. Why not let it go? Why not walk away and start fresh? And I tell them this, because land is just dirt until someone loves it. And once someone loves it, it becomes part of who they are. You don't walk away from that. You walk back to it on your own terms. Marla got the land. That's true. On paper, she won. But in the story that mattered, the one written in summers and rainstorms and Sunday mornings, she's barely a footnote. She doesn't know what the pond smells like at dawn. She doesn't know which fence post leans just a little too far to the left. She doesn't know that Grandma used to leave wildflowers on the third step of the porch every Wednesday, just because she could. That's what she missed. And that's what I protected. I didn't do it with anger. I didn't do it to punish her. I did it to make sure that someone someday walking this road would feel the heartbeat that still hums through the trees. That quiet rhythm of care, sacrifice, and memory. I did it because Grandma taught me to stand for what matters. And because sometimes the loudest justice comes not from raising your voice, but from planting your feet. So no, this isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about holding the line. About choosing grace when you could choose destruction. About understanding that what they take from you doesn't define you, how you respond does. I gave up the fight for the land, but I kept the legacy, and that was enough. Have you ever had something taken from you by someone you trusted? A house, a keepsake, a place that felt like it was yours? Have you ever been cut out of a legacy you helped build? I want to hear your story, because somewhere, another woman is walking that same road, wondering if she's the only one. Tell her she's not. Tell me she's not. Share your story in the comments below, because just like Margaret's Way, your voice leads somewhere powerful too.